Hey, and welcome to another episode of the Bug Jar. What we're going to talk about this time is a gig that I played over the weekend with my brother Wayne Redden and my good friend Trevor Walker. Several years ago, I had a band called Boho, and I'm talking like 15 years ago or more even. And it was me, my brother, and a friend of mine who's no longer with us named Joey. And we were like a rock band. We played a lot of jammy sort of stuff. And when Joey passed away back in 2010, we pretty much stopped doing that. Me and Wayne still did a lot of electric music over the years, but not quite as much. Several years later, we formed a band called Los Burros, which is basically the same, except with Trevor on bass instead of Joey, and we played a lot of the Boho songs. And over the years, Los Burros has only played like 2 or 3 live shows, but Trevor got us hooked up with a show at the Greenhouse Moto Cafe in Mills River, which is my hometown, Mills River, North Carolina, over the weekend. It ended up being a really fantastic experience, even though I was the most nervous about it that I had been about any show in a long time. I've played 70 shows with this lady this year. No worries at all. But that Los Burros show had me absolutely petrified. So right now, we're going to show you a little clip of that.
Zack and Kendra. Well, that's the fate of time. You yourself so sorry to stay.
So that was a clip of my song called Blueprints, which I wrote back in the Boho days. I actually wrote that on my 21st birthday. I'll just tell you a couple things that kind of blew my mind about playing an electric show after playing so many acoustic shows with Kendra over the years, is that I had forgotten a lot of things. Like my amp, I use a 67 Fender Bassman, which is a tube amp, and it didn't sound that good at first, and I was like, oh man, this tone is just not good. I don't like how this sounds, and I'm going to sound really crappy and all this kind of stuff. Like 20-30 minutes into playing, that thing started sounding amazing. I'd forgotten that tube amps change so much as you play them and they heat up. It's like the tone just went from being kind of to really warm and resonant and like full of all this natural distortion and breaking up from the amp being overdriven. So a lot of times for leads and stuff, I didn't even need to use a pedal. I just boosted the amp a little bit, and all of a sudden I had this beautiful thick lead tone. So that was one thing that was kind of wild for me. Another thing is that I was extremely sore over the next couple days because that Les Paul that I was playing a 79 Les Paul Custom, and that thing weighs, I don't know, like I think it's over 10 pounds. And so I had that on this little thin guitar strap over my shoulder, which I had this huge swollen knot, and then my ribs were sore from the guitar bouncing against my ribs. My palm, which I don't know if you can see that, but I had literally rubbed the skin off my palm from palm muting and playing, and none of that ever happens with the acoustic. Like the acoustic tends to make your fingers a little bit sore, but the electric really did more damage to my body than anything else I have experienced recently. And another thing is that we had only had one practice for any of those songs in, I don't know, 5 years or something, really. Like we'd played, I think, 1 or 2 other shows without any practice. But in about 5 years, we've practiced one time, 2 days before the gig. And I was like really nervous about that. But then when I got up there and started playing, and it just all came back. Like Wayne's really solid, Trevor's really solid. And it was just like everything was there. We were sounding great. And it was a lot of fun. My pastime of playing electric music was something I got to do that I don't normally do. And she got to take some photos, so...
Yeah, so when I was, I guess I was a teenager, I got super into going to concerts like a lot of teenagers do. We had this old Canon camera, and I would go to all of these concerts, and a lot of them were, general admission shows, so I would force my dad to drive me there and be like, we're going to get there at 4 o'clock in the afternoon and wait out in the cold. and get as close to the stage as possible so I can get good pictures. And at the same time, I was just a huge fan of music, and I was playing in my bedroom and writing songs in my bedroom as well. But photography became this kind of hobby that I had. And so when I started college, I took a little digital photography course. I continued to do my concert photography, and I was really just fascinated, not just with concerts and things like that, but with portraiture in general. I've been a part of this thing called the Winston-Salem Portrait Project, which is headed up by two fabulous artists, Keisha Bari and Jasmine Chang. And so obviously it's called the Winston-Salem Portrait Project, and it focuses on taking portraits of people and immortalizing folks in the community who have done really, really cool things. So I've been sort of immersed in a portrait type world and have learned so much just by being around them, being at their events, and reading the blogs and being around people who are constantly behind a camera. I've had the bug again. It had been a long time since I picked up a camera, and there were some things that I knew and didn't know and remembered and didn't remember. I got to the show on Friday night and set up the camera and started going around taking pictures. I was very aware of how my presence and my movements could potentially impact somebody's listening and viewing experience of the show, which as a teenager, I didn't care about. I was in the front and I liked it, and I had my big camera up in front of my face, and I probably blocked a lot of people's views. So this time, I was much more self-aware and tried to be really courteous to the audience and just sort of find ways to photograph the band in a way that I could get really nice framing and photos of everybody without interrupting people dancing, or without getting in someone's viewing space, or without having my camera like right behind someone's head, which I accidentally did at one time. Sorry about that if you're watching this. So I was much more aware of my presence and how to minimize the eyesore that can be someone with a camera walking around. So that was one thing. It took me a while to get back into the groove of things, but once I did, my instinct and the things that I had learned kind of came back pretty quickly. But yeah, it was a whole different experience, and it was fun for me because not only was I photographing a band that I was enjoying listening to, but I also knew the band. One of the things that Keisha had talked about in one of her talks about portraiture was capturing the thing that makes that person unique. And I didn't have the knowledge of the people that I was photographing as a teenager to know what made them unique and cool, besides the fact that they were a band that I really liked. But one thing that I love about Zack is he's really, really active when he's playing, and he does a lot of things with his face, and he moves around a lot, and he does like this little kick thing. And so there's one picture that I have where I got him just after a kick, where you can see his leg coming up into the frame, and I'm really happy with that photo because I captured something about Zack that makes him unique. And likewise with Trevor closes his eyes a lot and really sinks into what he's playing and singing, and I got a couple good shots of him doing that. Wayne was the hardest to photograph because not only was he behind a drum kit, but there are lots of things on the side of the stage and in the front of the stage.
There's a big stage,
it's
too.
A huge stage.
It's like several feet off the ground.
And there's just tons of, monitors and speakers and all these things that you have to navigate around. And I didn't necessarily want to come up on stage and be disruptive in that way. But then the other thing that I loved was that I got to take some video of Amanda, Wayne's wife, playing drums on one song, which was so fun. I also got one picture of her like standing up from the drum kit, and I love watching her play because she's just so fun, and she's just fun in general. And so
she approaches drums the same way she approaches everything. It's just like pure enjoyment of what she's doing.
Yeah, and all in. And so it was just so fun to see her get to do something like that. I mean, she's a amazing drummer too. So I liked getting to capture her face in real time as she's, grinning and like chuckling at herself at a little mishap and all that kind of stuff.
So, like the surprise of the different parts changing and stuff is like she was just there.
And don't be afraid, I'll prove every word I say. I'm advertised, you love for free, you place your...
So you can see what made shooting video of Amanda so fun. And I think that was a big thing. So yeah, I'm kind of like back into this frame of mind, and I would really like to go out to some more shows and get some more pictures of people, especially people that I know. I think that element was the thing that I wasn't expecting, but got the most out of, was being able to photograph people that I've had experience with and I know their personalities kind of well.
And I just want to say, you know, when I first started playing music, I did have an acoustic guitar as my first guitar, but pretty quickly moved to playing electric. And really, the majority of my early years of music were all electric. And in that time, I was really terrible as far as being able to play and sing and stuff. I just didn't know what I was doing. But I was writing a lot of these songs that we played the other night and making albums of those songs, and they were also terrible. But getting together, you know, 15, nearly 20 years later with Wayne and Trevor and working those songs up and playing them, I got to realize that the songs were there. Like, I was writing good songs, and we as a band were writing good songs. It's just I hadn't really developed the skills enough to play them. But to revisit them this many years later when we've all developed as musicians so much was a really fantastic experience. And one thing that I hope for other musicians is that, like, don't put your past creations in this little box on the shelf and, like, pretend that it doesn't exist. Don't throw it away. Don't get rid of it. Because there's something about that is both representative of where you were at the time, and also where you've come since then. But it was still good. It's still good stuff. You can find what was good about your old creation, whether it's visual art, camera, taking photos, audio stuff, whatever you've done artistically. It's still valid, it's still meaningful, and there's good quality stuff in there. And especially if you take it and reinterpret it a little bit through your modern skills and understandings and outlooks that you've developed, there's something there.
I watched an interview with Joni Mitchell recently from a few years ago where she was saying that the song Both Sides Now really needed to be sung by an older woman. She said the song made so much more sense from that perspective. She wrote it when she was 21. So I found this video of her singing it much later in life, and it's just the most incredible performance. I will link it below, and you'll see exactly what I'm talking about. Here's this song that she could have said, oh, I was a 21-year-old, and I was writing about stuff I didn't understand, and let's not bother with that anymore. But her reinterpretation of it with the perspective of age was really, really powerful.
The last thing about that show I'll say is that when I was 15 and 16 and 17 and writing a lot of those songs we played, it was my absolute dream to get up on a stage and play really loud electric rock music with distortion and drum solos and all these syncopated parts and all this kind of stuff, and have people actually enjoy it and clap and, you know, have a good show. And I never really got to have that when I was that age, and I think a big part of that was because I just hadn't developed enough as a musician. But now I've played so many shows, and I've developed and kind of figured out things, and also I've developed relationships over all that time. All these people that live in Mills River that I grew up with that are friends and, you know, family and stuff, a lot of them showed up to that show because they remembered me when I was 15 doing those songs, and I got to do that thing that I dreamed of. Now, I do think at this stage of my life I'm more generally an acoustic musician, and I'm a songwriter kind of guy, and what I do with the Brown Mountain Lightning Bugs is probably more my main focus. But to get up there and play loud, crazy, electric rock and roll music where I'm thrashing around on stage and doing these big multiple false endings and all this kind of stuff, and having people there that are all really digging it and jamming out just as hard, like, that's a dream I've had since I was 15 and first started playing guitar. So thank you to everybody who showed up to that show. Thank you guys for watching this video. Don't forget to subscribe, like the video if you like it, thumb it down if you don't.
And if you're in the Piedmont Triad area this month, we are playing a show with our friends Vagabond Crow. on November 7th at Double Oaks Bed and Breakfast. We've got some really cool stuff in store in the next couple months, so follow us on Instagram and Facebook and all those places and keep up with what we're doing, because we may be coming to your area in the not too distant future.